It was 9:59 p.m. and the cameras had started rolling in the RTE studio before the announcement at 10 of the exit poll for the 2020 election. But as they went live and waited for the deadline, the result was already clear, written on the furrows of worry visible on Dobbo's face, while David McCullough fidgeted and shuffled nervously. Over on Virgin Media, Irish Independent Ireland editor Fianna looked like he'd been sick in his mouth. It was true then. The unspeakable for the establishment had become reality. Sinn Féin had not just surged, they were a tsunami that in one instant swept away the walls the Irish establishment had built to protect their privilege, and the mainstream media hacks look really shook up. They've no control over the political narrative anymore, or the narratives about the history of the state they've told themselves and the rest of us for the last century. The election result was a total rejection of what Fine Gael represent, along with their policies, and also a rejection of Fianna Fáil, who lost 7 seats and faces quite the internal conundrum on whether to open negotiations with Sinn Féin or Fine Gael, which would end the illusion of choice between the two right-wing parties they've sold the Irish people for generations. Michael Martin, a man whose stunning lack of leadership abilities is so dazzling that it blinds you from his lack of conviction, inspiration and vision, has successfully painted himself into a corner between his watery principles and his very real desire for power. But the big news is, Sinn Féin are now the largest party in Ireland, even if they didn't expect it either. The sheer scale of the victory was exemplified by Sinn Féin's Johnny Mython, elected in Wexford, topping the poll with a whopping 19,000 votes, becoming the party's first TD in the county for 100 years. Even as surprisingly, King Billy, the guy who launched a successful Dutch invasion securing the English crown in 1690, made the surprising decision to run for a seat in the Wicklow constituency. Sinn Féin topped the polls everywhere, with massive surpluses, and might have won almost 50 seats if they had run the candidates. It was a huge shift, especially the younger generations of Irish people who have now managed to decriminalise abortion, legalise marriage equality, and end the two-party establishment merry-go-round of despair. And it's been done in half a decade. But look at the numbers though, and it wasn't just the youth. Sinn Féin are the largest party in every demographic apart from the over 65s. For many a long and depressing year, Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael used to command over 80% of the vote. Fianna Fáil, on 61 years, still has the record of the party with most years in government of any party in the Western Europe. And if I include Eastern Europe in that, they would give the Soviet Bolshevik communist regime a run for their money. In 2016 election combined, Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael just got about a combined 49.5%, the lowest in the history of the state, and now in 2020 down 5% more to 44.6%. The decline of the two major parties is happening, and it's happening fast. Fine Gael's vote share was the worst in history, with 10 sitting ministers losing their seats, and only the deserved kicking in the 2011 election that should have heralded their demise was there a worse result for Fianna Fáil. Even the attempts by the establishment media to smear Sinn Féin with a full-scale and concerted campaign was a total failure. And during the count they sat in their studios all day, dumbfounded, with Blue Hugh O'Connell, Lucinda Cretton, Pat Rabbit all trying to explain it, occasionally freshening things up with the reanimated corpses of people like Terry Prone and Frank Flannery, rumoured to be kept in Donnybrook by the way, cryogenically frozen in vats of their own hate, their lives unnaturally extended just to be temporarily unfrozen from time to time and wheeled out to deliver sermons of surreal lunacy from the era of Section 31. What's Section 31, you say? Well, let me explain. In 1994, Martin McGuinness said these words, "It's now time for peace in Ireland." It was the first time a member of Sinn Féin had been heard or seen on Irish media since 1971. That's right, kids. After the nationalist people in the north, abandoned since partition under a crushing apartheid regime that denied expression of Irish identity, basic human rights, access to housing, jobs or political representation, culminating in the 1969 civil rights protests, which were met with brutal state violence and loyalist pogroms, the burning of tens of thousands of nationalists out of their homes, leading directly to the establishment of the IRA in their defence against state violence.
Blame the IRA. There's no IRA that I know of about, but I wished I had been an IRA woman. I would have been here on the spot.
It was at this moment those paragons of virtue, also known as the Irish establishment, introduced censorship and denied a voice to Republicans and denied a population of the Irish Republic the truth about British brutality in the North. Thought control that was hardened in 1977 by arch-unionist Conor Cruise O'Brien, banning any Sinn Féin member to be broadcast on television or print, no matter what they were talking about, or whether they were speaking on behalf of Sinn Féin or not. RT's independence was being crushed around that time too, with serious allegations of MI5 spy rings in Irish political and media institutions, involving senior figures directing the news output to paint British policies in a positive light, and along with McCarthyite smears eliminating any independent journalists, it became a place only for the rabidly anti-Republican. The RT bias that many complain about has a long and murky history. Does this strike you as odd? How there can be a concerted campaign ramped up in panic at Sinn Féin's rise in the polls? A smear campaign run with military precision, see what I did there, involving private and state media directed at the same target, and all with the same talking points day after day. Add to that the exclusion of the Sinn Féin leader from the leaders' debates. The only two possible choices for Taoiseach, according to RT, would come from Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael, of course. Nicely framed narrative management there, RT. The Sinn Féin leader was only participating in the last debate after threatening to bring it to court. And of course, don't forget the relentless hostile tone of the interviews from the likes of Brian Dobson and Sean O'Rourke. The whole thing had a definite Section 31 vibe to it. The next video will definitely be about the Irish media and the history and strict narrative management by the establishment. Anyway, back in the here and now, the parade of establishment figures continued on screen, either ashen-faced, still in denial, or arrogantly dismissing the electorate and Sinn Féin. This is only matched by some of the representatives of Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael that were speaking as if the dull seats they were about to lose were their birthright and been stolen by Sinn Féin. Others scolded Sinn Féin voters and members for singing the stunningly appropriate anthem for this election, "Come Out You Black and Tans." Somebody should let them know about the words of Iran Levine, by the way. The demands and delusions continued though, as our favourite beard wearing a man, Irish elitist and class privileges Owen Murphy, breezed past the masses of protesting plebs shouting shame from the ditch, and he proceeded to regurgitate yesterday's right-wing talking points about shady figures behind the scenes controlling things, seemingly unaware of that's exactly how business is done in Ireland. The modus operandi of the Irish elite that had enriched themselves at our expense, using speculation rather than investment in actual economic activity. The greasy, corrupt state that produced the McCracken, Mahan, Moriarty, Morris and Disclosures tribunals, along with the Galway tent, the bank bailout, vulture funds, Project Eagle and NAMA haircuts for Dennis O'Brien's SideServe, who is either a government tender application extraordinaire or an actual shady figure behind the scenes of Fine Gael. Not to mention the land hoarders, landlords, IBEC, ACC Bank, IBF and all the rest. The result was the electorate clearly saying they've had enough, but the Irish media continued to obfuscate and worse. That's My Field Kenny was actually calling voters stupid live on air, while they all ignored the issues that drove the electorate's choices. Even The Guardian, brought to you by the British MOD, identified a few, and I even managed to point them out in my pre-election video. Number 1. Rampant homelessness and housing crisis caused by Fine Gael protecting the wealthy landlords and landhoarders and vulture funds that's caused people in Ireland to not only have to put up with the endless shite drizzle, but pay most of their income in rent for shoddy, damp and mouldy shacks. That's if they can find one. Number 2. The never-ending grinding poverty and people's quality of life being crap with no end in sight. And yet the health system chronically not fit for purpose. So out of touch are Fine Gael and Fianna Fáil TDs.
But the facts are that we did our job in health, we did our job in employment, we did our job in education.
Maybe Patrick.
Now you take it over now and wreck it with your policies.
Patrick.
I'm not sure they're aware public hospitals exist, let alone use one. If they are, why would they get in the waiting list of 1 million people when they can pay private hospitals with their vastly inflated wages and expenses to skip the queue? And number 3, the scales falling from the electorate's eyes during the campaign, starting right at the beginning, at the first leaders' debate, the campaign that revealed that yes, Leo Varadkar and Michael Martin are in fact not wearing any clothes. But number 4, I think it's the centenaries of the Easter Rising and the War for Independence that's had an unexpected catalyst for the Irish psyche. The state and Catholic Church shamed and persecuted Republicans that paid more than lip service to the idea, especially after the conflict took off in the north of Ireland. But with the centenaries of those events coming to the fore, the question that is raised, what is the actual difference between the IRA campaign that led to the formation of the very state we're all celebrating and the IRA campaign beginning in the 1970s? This was Irish people fighting a war surrounded not only by a nasty sectarian state in control of the entire security apparatus, but the full might of the British state, who were clandestinely directing the whole thing, loyalist death gangs and all. Something the Irish establishment claimed was Republican fantasy at the time, by the way.
We had strong suspicions that there was collusion. We would raise it, the British would deny it. That was it.
I'd fundamentally put it in a moral frame that I had real issues in working with a party that behaved like this.
I don't believe any Irish government have had the balls to go and ask the British government for the documents to find out what was going on and if there was collusion.
And that constantly seeks to justify the murder and mayhem of 40 years.
If you can establish the truth, you're not rewriting history, you're telling history.
The murder and mayhem of 40 years.
We were a group of police officers who linked up with UDR, UVF, UDA. Our role was to carry out attacks against nationalist and Republican community.
And I'd fundamentally put it in a moral frame.
These were bomb, shooting attacks. If ordinary Catholics were shot, nobody was too worried about it.
Yet Sinn Féin keep trying to shove down people's throats the narrative this was all just and great.
We don't have the closure yet that we're seeking. We will keep going in the name of my father and his legacy.
Shove down people's throats.
How were you able to target Republicans in the way that you did?
Security Forces information.
Shove down people's throats.
Which branches of the security forces?
All branches.
That little boy was shot when he was running away. He was just a little bit behind me when he fell. I heard the shot, I looked around, I saw him down.
You saw him?
Yes. And he was shot.
He was a young man.
He was a young boy, I would say about 15.
Positioned in mind, I'd fundamentally put it in a moral frame.
But if you're asking me, could we have got where we are at the moment without people resorting to armed actions? No, we could not have.
There was no alternative to the death and destruction.
In my opinion, that is not to say that everything that happened was right, because many things that happened were totally and absolutely wrong. And I wasn't being glib, Ryan, when I talked about your grandfather, because you're obviously proud of your grandfather.
But
he was a member of the IRA. He opposed the treaty
in a very in a very different time. I'd say if you looked into the audience and you could do a hands up and find at least a third of them had relatives who were in the old IRA. So I don't think the comparison is remotely
why not,
is
fair.
Well, again, I'm not going to get into a political state. No, because we could talk about.
I was born into a state that didn't want me. I was born into a state where people who were of a national mind were abandoned.
So did you?
That contradiction between the supposed morality of the good IRA and the bad provisional IRA was always there, but repressed by the church and the establishment media in Section 31.
As a Northerner, you cannot help but be struck by the deep hypocrisy of all this stuff, because all of the guys in Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael who were deploring the IRA and what they were doing in 1972, 1973, their fathers did the same stuff in 1920, 1921.
I mean, let's not do this southern naivety, but that our violence was okay, and we will make heroes out of our violence. But see these bad, evil black people in the north, their violence is not okay. IRA were bad, British were good, the Irish were good, and 1916 was good, but actually up here was bad. Not true. This is as complex up here in our age as it was in Dublin in that age.
But the trigger to unleash all that underlying nationalism bubbling under the surface was Charlie Flanagan and co. insisting on the RIC Tan commemoration. This really pushed people over the edge. Now the Republican genie is out of the bottle, and what's sure is, new narratives will be written in the years to come. Their version of Irish history lies in ruins. The one that says the Orange State was a perfectly legitimate entity, and the nationalists should have accepted their fate. Unionists were the true heroes, and the less the South had to do with the whole mess, the better. It involved censorship and banning Sinn Féin from the airwaves, and after making the IRA a huge issue during the election campaign, the establishment got their answer. Their revisionist history is finished. The Irish people don't believe it anymore. Which leads me to the future of the parties, because you actually have to wonder to yourself, what even is the point of Fianna Fáil anymore? Fine Gael will always be able to fall back on the legacy of the old Irish parliamentary party of Parnell and Redmond, the private Dublin colleges of the wealthy class. Fianna Fáil are supposedly a Republican party, but are bitterly partitionist and so anti-Republican that even Live and Let Live's Jeffrey Donaldson of the DUP was taken aback. They are right-wing economically, aren't able to move left or else admit Sinn Féin are correct. They represent an increasingly irrelevant cultural identity. Their breed of social conservatism that for so long tied Catholicism with Irishness is increasingly dying out. No wonder Fianna Fáil's leadership were so vehemently anti-Sinn Féin, because Sinn Féin's radical republicanism more authentically represents this nationalist thread that goes all the way back to 1916 and right through to the United Irishmen, based on values that are liberal, left, anti-imperialist and egalitarian. The nationalist movement in Ireland is left-wing, which we can be really glad of, not the reactionary Christian anti-immigration movements we see elsewhere in Europe. I'll do a video on the 0.2% of clodhoppers on the far right soon. The good news though, Renew, the National Party, the Irish Freedom Party and ACI all got such a tiny vote, none of them are eligible for state funding. But there's no doubt, the Sinn Féin result is the biggest shock to the ruling elite since the foundation of the state. Something momentous happened in Ireland in the last month, and now Irish unity is on the agenda like never before. Sinn Féin leader Mary Lou MacDonald has already called on the European Union to take a stand on the border question and support a united Ireland in the same manner it supported the reunification of Germany. The establishment took a few days to react, but there are rumblings of the Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael Green Grand coalition to head off a Sinn Féin led progressive government, against the obvious wish of the people, or even another election. But no matter the formation of the next government, the political landscape has been changed utterly. The whole island is standing on the threshold of a brand new era of Irish history. A history in which the Irish nation has produced many remarkable people. In our bones is the prose of our greatest writers, poetry that enriches our vision, brave and courageous men that filled our souls with nourishment and hope, even as we starved. Freedom, liberty, equality, ideals that made us richer than empire or greed ever could. The keys to this legacy were handed over at the foundation of the state. Ireland's new political and official rulers inherited nothing of those values. The only inheritance they sought was to inhabit the old British structures, which they would maintain for 100 years. The totality of their imagination was to fumble in a greasy till, their interest only in themselves. For what are Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael but the scaffolding of the mediocre, the stunted imagination of the traumatised Irish psyche? One after the other, the Irish nation marked the centenary of the events of the men that blew open the doors of the possibility of freedom. And the Civil War stories Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael used for so long to divide the people and the wealth among themselves don't sound true anymore. They spent so long in their former master's house, they now see in themselves the villains of our history. But their attempt to bury the ghosts that haunted them has only awakened them again in the minds of the Irish people, reminding us that we once had a vision of a gleaming palace that resembles nothing of this crumbling ruin they created around us, with nothing left to sell. Now, the people have taken the opportunity to strike for our freedom, and we may finally build a proper home to unite all the people of this island and create the Ireland that the finest of us always dreamed was possible.